I thought I was just helping a desperate young woman find shelter for one night. But when I discovered what she left behind in my daughter's room the next morning, I realized this stranger had been watching us for weeks. What she knew about our lives would change everything forever. My name is Daniel, and 6 months ago, my world fell apart. Not in the dramatic way you see in movies, but in that slow, suffocating way that creeps up on you until one day you wake up and realize you're drowning. My wife, Sophia, didn't just leave me. She abandoned our 8-year-old daughter, Lily, like she was discarding an old coat she'd grown tired of wearing. One morning, I woke up to find a note on the kitchen counter that simply said, "I can't do this anymore. Don't try to find me." The wedding ring I'd saved 3 months to buy was sitting right next to those devastating words. If you've ever felt like the universe was testing just how much you could handle before you break, hit that like button. Because trust me, you're going to want to stay until the end of the story. What happened next taught me that sometimes our darkest moments are just setting the stage for something extraordinary. The months that followed were a blur of overtime shifts at the auto shop, trying to explain to Lily why mommy wasn't coming home, and learning that cereal for dinner isn't actually the end of the world when it's served with enough love. I dragged myself through 14-hour days, my hands permanently stained with motor oil, just to come home and pretend I had energy left to be the father Lily deserved. The bills kept piling up faster than I could pay them, and some nights I'd sit at that kitchen table, staring at the eviction notice, wondering how I was supposed to hold everything together when I felt like I was falling apart from the inside. Lily never complained, not once. She'd do her homework at that same kitchen table, her little legs swinging from the chair that was too big for her, and she'd ask me about my day like she genuinely cared about carburetor repairs and transmission problems. But sometimes when she thought I wasn't looking, I'd catch her staring at the door, waiting, always waiting for someone who was never coming back. Those moments hit harder than any punch I'd ever taken. Here was this perfect little human who deserved the world, and all I could give her was a father who was barely keeping his head above water. That's when Elena walked into our lives, though at the time I had no idea she was about to turn everything upside down. It was one of those October evenings where the rain comes down sideways and soaks you to the bone before you can even think about running for cover. I was coming home from another soul-crushing day, my shoulders aching from hunching over engine blocks, when I saw her sitting on the steps of our apartment building. She couldn't have been more than 22, with dark hair plastered to her head and clothes that looked like they'd seen better days. But it wasn't her appearance that stopped me in my tracks. It was the way she was holding herself, like she was trying to disappear into the concrete. She looked up when she heard my footsteps, and I saw something in her eyes that I recognized immediately. It was the same look I'd been seeing in my own mirror for months, that desperate, hollow expression of someone who's run out of options and is just trying to figure out how to make it through the next hour. She mumbled something about being locked out, about her phone dying, about not having anywhere else to go. Every rational part of my brain was screaming at me to keep walking, to not get involved, to protect what little stability Lily and I had managed to build. But there's something about recognizing your own pain in a stranger's eyes that makes you do things you never thought you were capable of. "You can crash on our couch tonight," I heard myself saying, the words coming out before I could stop them. Just for tonight. The relief that washed over her face was so genuine, so raw, that for a moment I forgot about all the reasons why inviting a stranger into our home was probably the worst decision I could make. Sometimes our hearts make choices that our heads can't understand, and as I watched Elena follow me up those worn stairs to our apartment, I had no idea that this single act of kindness was about to unravel secrets that would change our lives forever. Looking back now, I realize the signs were there from the very first moment Elena stepped into our apartment. But when you're drowning in your own problems, when every day feels like you're barely surviving, you don't notice the small details that should have been screaming warnings at you. You just feel grateful that someone, anyone, seems to care about the life you're struggling so hard to hold together. The first thing that should have set off alarm bells was how easily Elena moved through our space. I watched her navigate around our coffee table like she'd done it 100 times before, stepping over the spot where the floorboard creaks without even looking down. When Lily asked where the bathroom was, Elena pointed down the hallway before I could even open my mouth to answer. I brushed it off at the time. Maybe she'd been in similar apartments before. Maybe she was just good at reading layouts. But there's a difference between being observant and knowing exactly where someone keeps their spare towels. What really got to me was dinner that first night. I was heating up some leftover pasta, apologizing for not having anything fancy to offer, when Elena casually mentioned that Lily probably preferred the strawberry yogurt I kept in the fridge over the vanilla. The thing is, I'd never told her about Lily's preferences. Hell, I'd never even opened the fridge in front of her. But there she was, talking about my daughter's eating habits like she'd been part of our family for years instead of ours. When I asked how she knew, Elena just smiled and said she was good at reading kids. That smile didn't quite reach her eyes. But here's the thing that made me question my own sanity. Elena was incredible with Lily. I mean, absolutely natural in a way that made my heart ache because it reminded me of what we lost when Sophia left. She helped Lily with her math homework, patiently explaining fractions in a way that actually made sense to an 8-year-old. She braided Lily's hair for school the next morning with the kind of precision that takes practice. When Lily showed her the drawing she'd made of our family, just her and me, two stick figures holding hands, Elena stared at it for the longest time before quietly asking if she could keep it. That's when I found her crying in the kitchen at midnight. I'd gotten up for a glass of water, and there she was, standing by the window with tears streaming down her face, holding Lily's drawing like it was made of gold. When I asked what was wrong, she just shook her head and whispered something about how some people don't deserve the families they have, while others would give anything for what they've lost. I wanted to comfort her, to ask what she meant, but something in her posture told me to keep my distance. There was a heaviness around Elena that felt familiar, like she was carrying the kind of pain that changes you at the cellular level. The strange moments kept piling up. Elena mentioned knowing about the broken latch on Lily's bedroom window, something I'd been meaning to fix for weeks but had never discussed with anyone. She knew our neighbor's dog was named Bruno. She knew I worked at Martinez Auto Shop before I'd ever told her. When I started asking direct questions about her own life, her answers kept shifting. First, she was from Portland, then Seattle. She was a college student, then she'd taken a gap year. She had family nearby, then she was completely alone. Every time I tried to pin down the details of who Elena really was, she'd deflect by focusing on us, asking about Lily's school or my work schedule or how we were managing since Sophia left. The breaking point came 3 days later when I realized Elena knew things about us that she couldn't possibly know. She mentioned that Lily's favorite teacher was Mrs. Rodriguez before Lily had ever brought it up in conversation. She knew I'd been working overtime on Thursdays to make extra money. She even knew that Sophia used to make pancakes every Sunday morning, a tradition we'd stopped after she left because it hurt too much to continue. These weren't lucky guesses or careful observations. This was intimate knowledge of our daily lives, our routines, our private moments. That night, as I lay awake listening to Elena moving around our living room, a terrible thought crept into my mind. What if this wasn't coincidence? What if Elena's sudden appearance in our lives wasn't the random act of fate I'd believed it to be? What if someone had sent her here? And if so, why? The woman sleeping on our couch wasn't just a stranger who needed help. She was someone who had been watching us, studying us, learning our secrets. And I had no idea what she planned to do with that information. I woke up that Thursday morning to the sound of silence, and somehow I knew immediately that Elena was gone. There's a particular quality to emptiness that you learn to recognize when you've been abandoned before. It's heavier than regular quiet, pressing down on you like a weight you can't shake off. The blanket was folded neatly on the couch. Her few belongings vanished as if she'd never existed at all. But the absence of Elena wasn't what made my blood run cold. It was what I found 30 minutes later that turned my entire world upside down. Lily was getting ready for school, humming one of those songs kids pick up from nowhere, when she called out that something was under her bed. I figured it was probably a toy or maybe one of her books, so I got down on my hands and knees to fish it out. What I pulled from under that bed wasn't a forgotten plaything. It was a manila envelope, thick and heavy, with my name written across the front in handwriting I didn't recognize. My hands were shaking as I opened it, though I couldn't have told you why. Some part of me already knew that whatever was inside was going to shatter the fragile piece we'd found. The first thing that fell out were photographs, dozens and dozens of them, scattered across Lily's bedroom floor like pieces of a puzzle I didn't want to solve. But these weren't random pictures. They were photos of us. Me and Lily at the grocery store, choosing cereal in aisle 3. Me picking her up from school, her little backpack bouncing as she ran toward my truck. Us at the park on Saturday mornings, Lily on the swings while I pushed her higher and higher, both of us laughing at something I couldn't even remember now. Someone had been watching us, documenting our lives with the precision of a scientist studying lab rats. The photos went back months. There were pictures of me working late at the shop, my face illuminated by the harsh fluorescent lights as I bent over another broken engine. There were shots of Lily walking to school, her small figure captured from across the street with a telephoto lens. There were even photos taken through our apartment window, images of us eating dinner together, me helping with homework, both of us curled up on the couch watching cartoons on Sunday afternoons. Every private moment, every intimate detail of our struggle to rebuild our lives after Sophia left had been cataloged and preserved by someone hiding in the shadows. But it was the letter tucked beneath all those photographs that made me sink to the floor, my legs suddenly unable to support the weight of what I was learning. The handwriting was Elena's, but the words belonged to someone I'd never met. "My name is Elena Vasquez," it began, "and I am a licensed private investigator hired by your ex-wife, Sophia Chen Morrison, to conduct surveillance and gather evidence regarding your fitness as a parent." The words blurred together as I read them, my mind struggling to process what felt like a betrayal so complete it took my breath away. Sophia wanted full custody of Lily. She was building a case to prove I was an unfit father, that my financial struggles and work schedule made me incapable of providing proper care. Elena had been hired to find evidence of neglect, of instability, of anything that could be used to convince a judge that Lily would be better off with a mother who had abandoned her 6 months earlier. For weeks, Elena had been watching us, waiting for me to fail, documenting every moment where I fell short of some impossible standard of perfect parenting. But as I read through Elena's detailed report, something extraordinary began to emerge from the pages. Instead of finding evidence of my failures, Elena had documented something else entirely. She wrote about watching me wake up at 5 in the morning to pack Lily's lunch, making sure she had her favorite sandwich cut into heart shapes. She described seeing me fall asleep in the chair next to Lily's bed after reading 3 bedtime stories, too exhausted to make it to my own room. Her report detailed how I'd sold my guitar, the one thing I'd kept from my life before Lily, to pay for her school supplies and new shoes. "In 6 weeks of surveillance," Elena had written, "I have observed a father who sacrifices everything for his daughter's well-being. Daniel Morrison works double shifts to provide for Lily while maintaining patience, kindness, and dedication that exceeds any standard of parental care I have witnessed in my professional career. The woman who was supposed to destroy our family had instead become our most powerful advocate, documenting love in its purest, most exhausted form." The final paragraph of her report hit me like a physical blow. "I cannot in good conscience provide testimony that would separate this child from a father who loves her unconditionally. My recommendation is that Sophia Morrison Chen's petition for custody be denied, and that she be required to demonstrate genuine commitment to her daughter's well-being before any visitation rights are considered." Elena hadn't just refused to betray us, she was preparing to fight for us. I was still sitting on Lily's bedroom floor, surrounded by photographs and struggling to process everything I'd just learned, when I heard the front door open. My first instinct was panic. What if it was Sophia coming to take Lily away? But then I heard Elena's voice, soft and hesitant, calling my name. For a moment I couldn't move. Part of me wanted to confront her, to demand answers for the deception that had turned my world inside out. But another part of me, the part that had watched her braid my daughter's hair and cry over a stick figure drawing, knew that the woman who had just walked back into our lives was here to make things right. When Elena appeared in the doorway and saw me sitting there with her photographs scattered around me, her face crumpled with a guilt so raw, it was painful to witness. "I came back to tell you everything," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I couldn't leave knowing what Sophia was planning without giving you a chance to fight back." She sat down across from me on that bedroom floor, and for the next hour she told me a story that explained everything and changed nothing, and somehow made perfect sense all at the same time. Elena had lost her own father when she was exactly Lily's age. Not to death, but to abandonment. He'd walked out on her and her mother for a newer, shinier version of family, leaving behind a little girl who spent years wondering what she'd done wrong. When Sophia hired her to find evidence of my failures as a parent, Elena thought it would be just another routine case. She'd document a few instances of neglect, maybe catch me losing my temper or leaving Lily unsupervised and collect her fee. But what she found instead was a man who reminded her of everything her own father should have been. "I watched you work 16-hour days and still have energy to help with homework," she told me, tears streaming down her face. "I saw you give up everything that mattered to you to make sure Lily never felt the abandonment I lived with every day." I documented love in its purest form, and I realized I couldn't be part of destroying that. Elena had made a choice that would cost her professionally but save her personally. She was going to testify on our behalf, and she had evidence that would ensure Sophia's custody petition failed spectacularly. The documents Elena showed me that day revealed a side of my ex-wife I'd never known existed. Sophia hadn't just left us. She'd been planning her exit strategy for months, moving money into hidden accounts and building a new life with her boyfriend Marcus, a man with a criminal record for domestic violence that Elena had uncovered. Sophia's sudden interest in custody had nothing to do with missing Lily and everything to do with the child support payments she could collect in the tax benefits she could claim. She saw our daughter as a financial asset, not a human being who needed love and stability. 3 weeks later, I found myself in a courtroom that smelled like old wood and broken dreams, watching Elena take the witness stand to testify on our behalf. Her voice was steady and professional as she presented her findings, but I could see her hands shaking slightly as she described the months she'd spent watching our family. She talked about the photographs she'd taken, but instead of evidence of neglect, she presented them as documentation of devotion. Every image became proof of my commitment to Lily: the early mornings, the late nights, the sacrifices that had become as natural as breathing. When Sophia's lawyer tried to discredit Elena's testimony, suggesting she'd been compromised by personal feelings, Elena looked directly at my ex-wife and said something I'll never forget. "I was hired to find evidence that Daniel Morrison was an unfit parent. What I found instead was a father who embodies everything good about parenthood, raising a daughter who feels safe, loved, and valued every single day. If that's being compromised by personal feelings, then I'm proud to be compromised." The judge's ruling was swift and decisive. Not only did Sophia's petition for custody fail, but her visitation rights were restricted pending a full investigation into her abandonment and financial deception. Elena's testimony had done more than save our family. It had exposed the truth about a woman who was willing to use her own child as a pawn in a game of greed and manipulation. But the real resolution came later, in the quiet moments after all the legal battles were over. Elena kept her promise to stay in Lily's life, becoming the big sister and mentor my daughter had never had. She started a foundation to help single parents navigate custody battles, using her investigative skills to protect families instead of tearing them apart. And me? I learned that sometimes the people who seem like strangers are actually exactly who we need, arriving at precisely the right moment to remind us that we're stronger than we think and more loved than we dare to believe. Sometimes karma doesn't come as punishment. It comes as redemption, wearing the face of someone who understands your pain because they've lived it too.